Hey, Hunter here from Infinite Catalog, where royalties don't have to be hard. And I'm back. I'm back with my louder and clearer report for 2026. And if you're not familiar, this is the third year where I've done this, where Spotify puts out this loud and clear report, as they call it, every year, which, right here, they say right up front, artists deserve transparency about how music streaming works. I could not agree more. And this report is, it's PR. Let's be real. And that's fine. No shade on PR, but, we don't expect PR to tell us sort of what's really going on, with a company or the impact that company or decisions that they're making are having, especially when those impacts are of the negative variety. This report is all positive wall to wall. And that's just not the lived experience or reality of the hundreds of record labels and publishers and managers that we work with at Infinite Catalog to help pay tens of thousands of artists. So a few years ago, I noticed that Spotify includes what they call payouts data in this report every year, which is just a bunch of different revenue tiers and the number of artists in that tier every year, which I'm sure that they include because it looks very nice. It looks like, wow, look at the number growing year over year, making $1 million this year. It's gone up 230% since 2017. And that is good. And that is impressive. But a royalty nerd like me, notices that, this can tell us more than perhaps what they are meaning for it to tell us, because we can compare these numbers year over year and see which tiers are winning and losing more or less. And we can compare that to the big numbers that they give us, like the $11 billion total payout that they is the number one takeaway for them this year, and they've given us this number the last few years. And basically that lets us look at how the tiers are doing year over year. And so that's what this louder and clearer report, as I call it, is all about. And it's not to dunk on Spotify intentionally. It's just to sort of be real with ourselves and hopefully the wider music community about what's actually going on, so we can try to improve things. Even if things are going well, maybe they could be going better. So that's what this report is. And so much to talk about this year that I've broken it into 3 parts. And this is part 1, and it's called The Incredible Shrinking Slice. And I'm going to take you through some of the big highlights of it this year, or of part 1 right now. And the number one takeaway, the big takeaway, the Spotify pie grew $1 billion. Very impressive. The average per artist slice shrank at least $217, which $217 maybe doesn't seem like a lot of money, but the fact that the pool can grow by this amount, but everybody within it is losing, is notable and something to be aware of. It hasn't gone down every single year, as we talk about in the report, and I'll talk about briefly here, but it did go down between 2024 and 2025, and the math here, I think, is pretty indisputable. And I include the methodology here and talk about how I got to these numbers as well. So by all means, poke, prod, stress test. But yeah, it looks like the average dollars per artist went down 0.7% year over year, at least. And that at least is because we don't know how many artists are making between 0 and 1K. They don't give us that number. It only starts at 1K in the payouts breakdown, 1K and above. And, despite the under 1,000 stream income threshold, where if you have streams that are total to fewer than 1,000, you don't get paid for any of those. That doesn't mean that you can't make less than $1,000. You totally can, and a lot of people definitely do. And they leave out that tier. It's sort of the mystery tier in the data. So we don't know that number, but they give us the total. They give us $11 billion as like the total of the payout pool. So what that lets us say is that these numbers are at least. It's probably worse than this, because every single tier added new artists. There are more artists in the pool, which is the primary reason, one of the primary reasons, as we'll talk about, that the number has gone down. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. New artists is a good thing. I want to be very clear about that. I talk about it more in the report, but it's almost certain that the 0 to 1K tier also went up like every single other tier. And if it did, then that means that this number is low, that these numbers are low. So, it went down at least $217 on average, for everybody. And that to me says that, from 2024 to 2025, everyone's a loser. Even if you are making tons of cash or made more in 2025 than you did in 2024, you're still kind of losing because you're actually making less than you otherwise would have. And it's wild how much that is sort of like a microcosm of what it feels like to be in a Western economy these days, where, you might be making more, but it still feels like you're falling behind. And it's very interesting to me that Spotify is like a little microcosm of that. And we can see it quite clearly in the data. That 0.7% number is just being evenly applied here in this column. These are not exact figures. It's not that this tier they lost exactly that, or this tier they lost exactly that. We don't know the individual dollars per tier. We can only estimate it, and because we can only estimate it, these are estimates themselves. But I included it because I think it's reflective of the sort of everyone's a loser when the slice shrinks phenomenon, and I think that's important to know. Especially when you think of the alternative. When the slice is improving, as it has, as we'll talk about in a second, that means everyone's a winner. It means that even if you aren't doing particularly well, you are doing better than you otherwise would have, given, the same conditions. So to me, this is a very important concept and a very important number, and that is why it kicks off part one of my louder and clearer report. Part two is about a little bit of a wider scope view, because I've been doing this now for 3 years. We have more data. Maybe this was a one-time drop. It wasn't. And the shape of it is very interesting, I think, and that's what I'm going to try to take you through right now real quick. This was the average slice in 2022. Big drop in 2023. Nice recovery in 2024. The one time in this data set, at least, that the slice moved up and everyone was a winner in 2024. But the overall picture from 2022 to 2025 is worse than just 2024 to 2025, which is actually a pretty small dip comparatively. The total drop off is $1,377 approximately, at least. Again, that same at least, or 3.7%. Which, not good. Really not good. When you think about some other wider factors, which we'll talk about in a second. But first, I want to talk about this recovery, which jumped out at me, and I was very interested in what might have caused this, because that's something that we all benefit from. Artists, people in the music industry, Infinite Catalog directly. We all benefit when everyone's winning in the music industry. So what caused the increase? It's definitely headcount to a certain degree, but it's also when Spotify raised prices. Spotify famously did not raise prices for over a decade, from like 2011 to 2023. They did raise prices in July 2023 and again in July 2024. So 2024 is the year that like saw the biggest impact of that, because it got all of the first price increase and half of the second price increase. The 2023 only got, from July onward in 2023. And surely that price increase did sort of stem the decline, this like humongous drop off to some degree. But it seems very clear to me from the data that that the recovery was largely the price increases. And I've looked at it and controlled for the headcount increases as well. And the more you do that, the more it seems like the price increase. So that's something to be mindful of, because it's very in Spotify's control and has been this whole time. And I'll get into the reasons why that's particularly damning, I think is fair to say. But yeah, that's in 1 second, because we also, I could not talk about inflation, because it's a very real thing, and it really, supercharges this phenomenon that we all feel of like, I feel like I'm doing about the same or maybe even a little bit better in my take home pay, but it feels worse. It feels like I'm doing worse. I feel like I'm falling behind. Inflation is, a big reason why that is, and inflation doesn't, artists are just as affected by inflation as anyone else. And when you factor inflation in, it looks really, really bad. It's a real decline of roughly $5,000 per artist on average, or 12.4% in purchasing power over 4 years. That's impacting every single artist in the pool in the same way as our generalized sort of like when the average slice shrinks, everyone's a loser. And it also came during a time of 2 price hikes and the royalty pool itself growing $2 billion, which is not good. It's really bad. Yeah, I think very illustrative of the challenges that we're facing, and very interesting to find this data this conclusion in Spotify's data itself. And lastly, this year, or in this part 1 at least, I want to talk about the more mouths to feed, which I feel like is always the go-to excuse, shall we say, of Spotify and the cause of this phenomenon. And it is certainly true to a certain degree that there are more mouths to feed. And it is also true that new artists joining the pool is a good thing. I don't want to mince words about that. Infinite Catalog largely exists to help what we're now call working and mid-tier artists, get started, thrive within the music industry, have careers. That's basically the point of Infinite Catalog. So I don't think the problem is that there's more new artists joining the pool, and I don't think a solution is to limit the number of artists joining the pool or meaningfully participating in it, by raising that 1K stream threshold, which has no impact here, I assure you, or any other kind of sort of arbitrary gatekeeping mechanism. We also know that the massive number of new artists joining the pool includes a lot of scammers, a lot of money launderers, a lot of slop generators, a lot of artist impersonators who siphon money away from the real artists, what we must now call real artists, which kills me. And that's not a small number. BeatDap, a company that knows of these things, they have estimated that the amount is probably at least, 10% of the pool year over year, or has been up until I think the last time they quoted that figure was maybe 2024. And you can bet that number, I don't know whether it's going up or down, but it's a big number, and it's been very present in the pool for, perhaps the entire history of Spotify. 10% is a very big number. If it's $11 billion a year in payouts, 1.1 billion of that is going to scammers or people who should not be in the pool, let's just say. And, again, not to say that whale sounds aren't art or publishing white noise or whatever. I don't really think that we should be making those distinctions, but certainly money launderers, scammers, slop generators, artist impersonators, the lowest of the low, in my personal opinion. They're taking a lot of money out of the pool. That's a big factor here as well. Spotify does claim that they're doing a lot more on this front, and actually it does look like they are. It looks like there is an impact that's happening, and we're going to talk about that in part 3, which is more like the good news section. And I want to celebrate that. Again, the point here is not to dunk on Spotify. But it frustrates me, and I think it frustrates a lot of people across the music industry when, we are fed a lot of takeaways that are all super positive and in many ways feel like they are an attempt at Spotify to undercut reality and bend it to their own preferred narratives. And when the slice is shrinking and you feed artists all of these narratives, all these takeaways, to me it feels like being told by a ship's owner, like you're on a ship and you're being told that you should be grateful for your seat on an increasingly crowded and sinking ship, while the owners of that ship profit from your slow motion demise from their nearby yacht. And I don't think it's helpful for them to do that, and I don't think it's actually the truth, and that's what this report is largely about. I also don't think that more artists is the problem. I really, really don't. And that's from looking at the data and looking even more broadly at what Spotify has done actively. Because there are things that Spotify has done, is doing, that actively suppress artist and songwriter wages. Has nothing to do with the size of the pool, the number of artists in the pool. 3 things really jump out at me for that. One, and worst of all, I don't know, they're all bad. One is discovery mode. The thing that Spotify rolled out that is basically payola, where it allows you to agree to a lower royalty rate in exchange for a better chance at algorithmic discovery. They boost you in the algorithm to some completely unknown and unknowable degree. Costs them nothing. It disadvantages artists who don't play ball, and it's a race to the bottom for literally everyone. The more people opt into it, the less it actually works. That's the whole system. So, a Spotify engineered race to the bottom that reduces artist wages across the pool. Not a good thing. Something they're doing. Has nothing to do with more artists. The other is the legally dubious bundling that they did in 2024, or maybe it was 2025, of audiobooks and podcasts into their subscription tiers and shunting an estimated $230 million worth of mechanical royalties away from songwriters and publishers and towards audiobooks and podcasters. Basically, by labeling it a bundle in a way that they were not before, they were able to say that they could use that same money to pay these people instead of these people, which I think just speaks to the efforts that Spotify is going to increase their profitability at the direct expense of people in the music industry that they claim to care about. But really, it's the lack of price increases that is the most damning to me, because as we saw with the 2024 recovery, they have this ability. They have the ability to set the price of Spotify. And when you look at the fact that they did not raise prices from 2011 all the way to 2023, that's basically them choosing growth over profitability. And while the whole time they're running a deficit, when you're doing that, and this is the system, this is the way that you've constructed your platform, that deficit, that lack of profitability is not just being paid for by you or just by your investors. It's also literally being paid for by the artists in the form of their slices shrinking, or even just in their growth being held back by you not keeping prices in line with what people will pay in the market or what inflation dictates you should raise your prices to because your costs are going up or whatever it is. And there's a really good point of comparison here, which is Netflix. Netflix has a very different model. They don't have a royalty pool like this. They license everything individually. I'm not saying that's what Spotify should do, but I'm saying that's what Netflix has. And they raised prices repeatedly over the same period. When Spotify did raise prices in 2023, they swung from a 500 million euro loss to a 1.1 billion euro profit in under 2 years, which indicates that they didn't, hemorrhage subscribers. The headroom was always there. And you might even go so far as to say they saw the big drop off that was happening in 2023, and that twisted their arm enough to raise prices for the first time in over a decade. Okay, that's part one. Thank you for watching. I will be back with part two next week. Next week is a very interesting one, I think. It's much more about the distribution within the pool itself, and rather than the year-over-year changes to the slice. And I look forward to making that video and seeing you then. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for reading. And see you soon.